All right, everybody. Well, another week of First and Nole, and unfortunately, Florida State falls to Wake Forest 31-21. Means it's the first loss of the season. Ariya, Massoudi, Curt, Weiler, Roberto Aguayo, joining you here for another episode. Again, we are so thankful for all of you listening in, sharing this with your friends. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes if you can, on Apple, or on Spotify, and on your favorite listening device and streaming site, as well as YouTube. So, Curt, I'll start with you. Noles get their first loss of the season. It feels like from a macro level, a bird's eye view. Florida State, had a bit of a humbling act this weekend at Doak.
Yes and no. I think that was the case of, Wake Forest was definitely the better team on the day. I'm by no means convinced walking away from that Wake is miles ahead of Florida State. I think Florida State is around the same threshold as a Wake of a borderline top 25 team. I think it was a sloppy day by Florida State in quite a few facets and far from their best performance. And they're still in a 1-score game in the fourth quarter against a top 25 team. So, yeah, they were humbled a bit. Obviously, I think any notions of this timeline being incredibly accelerated are probably should be reevaluated after the weekend, and we'll see how the next few weeks go. But the undefeated Osceola rivals era is over, unfortunately.
Yeah, tough L there, and Florida State trying to pick up some pieces. Roberto, obviously, losing a game, not the end of the world. They have all their goals out in front of them, but in this week, it seemed like Wake Forest really took advantage of FSU's mistakes, and that's a Wake Forest program that's continuing to play at a high level under Dave Clawson.
Yeah, just like we've said before, with this Florida State team being more experienced, that Wake Forest team has been together for. Now Hartman's in his sixth year, fifth year, sixth year.
They're loaded with super seniors. They are loaded with super seniors.
With the COVID year, and then all of them just being super seniors. That experience came out this weekend, and it just showed. Like Curt said, we're not far behind them, but they are a good team. We knew what we were going to get into, and unfortunately, we started off hot, which we looked good, and then just made a couple mistakes that one led to another, and they just started dominating the game and ended up with a 18-yard drive at the end of the game, like just domination of controlling the field, the offense being on the field, which hurts your defense. They get tired. But good and bad, but we have a lot to look forward to the rest of the season.
Yeah. So, and it's a game too, that you guys both mentioned the experience that Wake Forest has. I think the number was like 39 guys that have been in that program for at least 4 years, and that, experience wins, and Wake is very talented, has a good coaching staff. And when I say very talented, they've built talent within their program. A.T. Perry, not a guy that lit the world on fire coming out of high school, but he's turned himself into probably an NFL receiver here soon. They've got a running back there who played pretty well on the day. Hartman, I think, has turned himself into at least going to get a shot in the NFL and will get a look, because he's one of the best quarterbacks, not just in the ACC, but in the country. But Wake does such a good job of counteracting some of their talent deficiencies in the trenches. They run the slow mesh. They have schemes set up on defense to be able to load numbers in the box, and they've tailored their style to who they are. They want to win games 35-28. If they can score more than that, they will. They win shootouts on the regular. And that's just something Dave Clawson has, kind of implemented in his program. He knows who Wake Forest is. He knows the type of talent they can bring in, and with good scheme and good evaluation, as well as good coaching and development, you have a shot. And so that's what Wake Forest has become. I like that you mentioned, Curt, that FSU, they didn't play their A game, but they also had a shot there at the end. That's a testament to what FSU has been able to build under Mike Norvell, because would you agree? Last year, considering the injuries that FSU has right now at key spots, this type of game probably goes ugly and stays ugly very fast.
I think 100%. I think it's tough. I think we are past the point of looking at just fighting or not going down without a fight or kind of rising up to adversity. We're past that. We're past the moral victory kind of part of the rebuild, it feels like. I mean, you're in year 3. That's kind of the time to, even if it was a pretty hefty rebuild, move past that. But yeah, I mean, I thought that game was going south. I mean, if you look at the body language of that defense on that first drive for Wake of the second half and how easily they marched down the field and made it 28-7, I was sitting there like, this might get ugly. We hadn't seen much from the offense lately. Wake had kind of been having its way with the FSU defense. And you worry what that could have been just from a discouragement standpoint for that defense and how that could be tough. And I think also, does national perception matter a ton? No. But if Florida State had been blown out, I think the national media and the national just college football fans may look at that as like, oh, maybe Florida State's 4-0 start was a fluke. I think they acquitted themselves well enough. I mean, they gave up just 3 points the rest of the way to give the offense a chance to rally. And pending some unfortunate mistakes, it felt like they could very well have won that game.
And I look back at some of the key plays of that game, and clearly, the fumble that Travis had gave Wake a short field, and they capitalized very quickly. That got Florida State down 21-7, I think at the time, 2-score game. And then, Wake comes out, impressive drive out of the half, and they're up 28-7. And all of a sudden we're all thinking, oh boy, is this going to be one of those days? But I do give credit, to Florida State for fighting back. I agree with you that the moral victories part of it is over. But that does say something about their ability to continue to push, because it wasn't that long ago where games like that got out of hand, and it wasn't because of a talent issue. It was teams that were, quitting on the season. So, Roberto, they get the lead down to 28-21. You've got a shot there. I don't know how many times in your day playing at Florida State, especially, you were down by 21 points in a game. But do you remember some of the conversations that your roster and that group on the sideline had to have to try and stay in and make a comeback?
So it all started from the poise of Coach Fisher and the calmness that we had. We knew we were good enough that we didn't panic or pressure or put more pressure on ourselves. I think we just stayed composed and knew we're gonna have to make the right decisions, the right plays, make the right blocks. To be able to get back into it. That 2014 year, we were down by a lot in a couple games. That Louisville game is the one that stands out more to me. And to me, what Coach Fisher would say is everyone just do your job. And to me, it was like, all right, I just have to, make my kicks, hit my kickoffs where I need to be. And that's doing my job. So, and if everyone can do their job, the O-line can block, the receivers can catch. We trust his play call, and sometimes stuff's gonna have to go our way. We're gonna need a turnover, something to happen. And for us to come back 21 points and be there, 28-21, trying to have a chance, I think that was good. I think that showed a lot of resilience in the team and composure. But like we said, it's still a rebuilding team. It's still an early, it's not a team coming off a national championship year. So they're building their confidence in at the same time. And if I'm Coach Norvell, I'm like, yeah, we lost, but there's a lot of good in this loss that we've seen. And if we can put it, a couple pieces down the, at the end of the game, a little bit together, we could come out with a victory. But that's how I look at it.
I know you're not out at practice that often, Roberto. I'll tell you though, do your job is something you'll frequently hear Mike Norvell telling his players how to practice too. That is, it's probably a fairly common one in the coaching community, yeah. I have to imagine, but yeah, that is a Mike Norvell-ism as well. That he is during water breaks, you'll often hear him talking to guys like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a reminder where sometimes you want to help out everywhere. Like if you're an O lineman, you want to make sure like, let me help him. Let me help, my tackle. If you're a guard, let me help my tackle. Let me help my nose guard. But at the same time, if you do your job and then he does his job, it's like kind of like in a way, like you think, okay, yeah, you're supposed to like, that's it's common sense, but it's kind of a reminder where just focus on what you got to do, make the catch, make the block, make the throw. And if everyone can do it together, piece it together, we can score and we can win games.
I think too, guys, like defensively, Florida State impressed me in that second half, because in the first half, they weren't doing their job. To kind of go back to what you guys were just talking, the defense was kind of giving up. First, they were losing first down. Wake was routinely in short yardage situations. And I think Wake finished something like 10 of 18 from third down, if I remember correctly, something like that. And then 3 of 3 on fourth downs. But a lot of that was because they were setting themselves up to have short down and distance on their third and fourth downs. And so that first half, Wake runs 51 plays in that ballpark, and FSU looks tired and gassed. And the offense after that hot start wasn't really allowing the defense to get rest because they were getting off the field kind of in a hurry. But that second half, give Adam Fuller some credit, because they did make some adjustments on how to disrupt that mesh. Curt, I was really impressed with some of the younger guys, like a Patrick Payton or a Josh Farmer that, in addition to Jared Verse and Kalen DeLoach, were able to make some difference maker plays throughout that game.
Yeah, they missed Jared Verse, or not Jared Verse, sorry. They missed Fabian Lovett in that first half pretty bad. As great as ends can be against a great pass rusher is going to be good against any offense. A great defensive tackle is better than a great defensive end when you're going against that slow mesh. You saw it when Clemson played Wake the week before, just where they would have plays where just those defensive tackles are pushing guys back into blowing up the slow mesh. That's the easiest way to beat the slow mesh, is just to kind of not give it a chance to work and just blow it up. And Florida State was definitely missing that in the first half. And I think it was part of too. I think Florida State's defense did well enough not giving up the big passing plays. That Wake Forest offense can be really explosive. And they gave up some dink and dunks, which I think they would have been okay with, to sacrifice stopping the run, and they couldn't stop the run, not consistently enough, especially in that first half. That's not a great Wake Forest run game this year, and it was great in that first half. And people can raise concerns about some holding penalties that weren't called, but you can't rely on that at the end of the day. It's not going to get called as often as it happens. And Florida State, I think the defensive line missed Fabian Lovett. You talked about it. I think Jared Verse, first came in on the third series, and I think really made a difference. He only played 23 plays. He only had 12 pass rush snaps, and yet he led the team in pressures. He had 3 pressures on 12 pass rush snaps. That makes a difference. And I think the attention he commands opened things up for Patrick Payton, who got the sack as the game progressed, for Josh Farmer, who got a sack as the game progressed. I think Kalen DeLoach got one as well. It's Jared Verse, it continues to impress. He was clearly not 100%, but he made a real impact in that second half, and I think was a key player in the near comeback.
For sure. And I look at, the rushing yards, 114 for Ellison on 18 carries. He hit one for 35, and it did feel like the mesh was causing FSU some problems because they couldn't win with the front 4. And then you have to start committing linebackers to that, and to that box, and getting closer to the line of scrimmage. And so give Wake credit. They won. They flat out beat Florida State. And yes, the penalties were pretty detrimental for most of the game. It seemed like every single penalty negated something pretty important for FSU. And I look back at there was a nice little, wasn't there a pass play that negated the ball being inside the 5? Instead, Florida State had to back up. But yeah, FSU, I thought, for the most part, played okay, and it was more Wake winning than it was FSU losing. At least that's the way I came at it.
So the play you're talking about, yes, it was a pass play to Pokey that I think took him down to the 4, and it got negated by a hold on Darius Washington. And Darius also gave up a sack in that series, and it eventually led to a punt because you had so little. I think it would have been a really long field goal, and obviously that's not a situation you wanted to put Ryan Fitzgerald in that moment. And so it ended up being a punt when you would have been down at the 4. And I can never be proven wrong in this, so I can say I think Florida State wins the game if that penalty isn't called, if that play goes down to the 4, because you add 7 points to what they ended up with. That in theory, that's a 28-28 game, and who knows how that series goes from there. I think some things change theoretically, but yeah, it's Mike Gravel said he thought the team was pressing a bit more in the first half than the second. But you wonder if, the number next to the name for the first time in 4 years, or a ranked matchup, a ranked opponent, a chance to really make a statement on a national level, if all kind of that didn't maybe make some guys maybe overthink things or try too hard rather than just do in that first half.
Roberto, when you played, man, like you guys were pretty good. I mean, when you got here, like FSU was really good the first year I think you even came to campus. But what was managing expectations like for your roster and for your groups? Because that is a lot of pressure to continue to play at that high of a level week in and week out.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were already, Coach Fisher was already creating, what he wanted coming off that 11-year 2012. We ended up going to the Orange Bowl. We redshirted, that class of 2012, me, Jameis, a couple other guys, but a couple other guys also started. But it was just, EJ and those guys, the Xavier Rhodes, the older guys that had set that tone. For us, that was just like what we had to do. And, I remember now leading into this NC State game, that 2012 game where I didn't play. I think we lost to somebody else, or NC State might've been our first loss. But that's kind of like when you have your first loss of the season or first loss in your career, when you get to school, you're kind of like, how do we bounce back from this? And, these losses here, like this loss to Wake Forest, it's a loss you can bounce back from and learn from, rather than, getting blown out 50-0. It's kind of like, okay, where do we start? But, I think this is like something separate. Like when you have your first loss of the season and you were doing so well, you were 4-0, all this hype. I mean, this team hasn't seen this hype since, back in 2015. And so, they've dealt with the positives. They've, dealt with everything. Okay, boom. They got hit in the mouth. They got their first loss. They gotten humbled a little bit. I think a lot of growing can come from this, especially early on in the season. And, they have two games coming up that are going to be hard to get through. And you just got to learn. We weren't that far off. I mean, when you make mistakes, like have 11 penalties for 96 yards, as opposed to 4 penalties for 40 yards for Wake Forest, like you're not going to set yourself up to win. The third down conversion percentage, 36%. Like we were 4 for 11 on third downs. Like, as compared to Wake Forest, 10 of 18, 55. Like, those little stats that you might not, think are big. If we can, win those matchups, win, those goals that we are wanting to get every game, we're going to set ourselves up for those last 3-4 minutes, or to give ourselves a chance. Today, or this past weekend, we got ourselves too far behind the ball. Coming back up 21 points it's hard. It's doable, but it's hard. And we saw it happen where we couldn't quite get there this weekend.
Curt, were you surprised by, I don't want to say the result, because I think obviously we respect Wake. Were you surprised by the way Florida State struggled offensively against that Wake defense?
I mean, it was definitely the most extended, cold stretch probably we've seen from the offense this season. I mean, the offense, to its credit, the lowest scoring game had been the LSU game. And I think that was another game where it was a deliberate tempo. FSU was not trying to kind of speed things up. It wasn't even, it's funny. It wasn't that bad. I think what made it worse was, you know how sometimes you'll see an offense or a defense feed off each other. I think the opposite was kind of happening here, whereas the confidence or the assuredness of the offense kind of plummeted with the 4 straight drives without punt without points, or three punts and a fumble there in the first half. the defense gave up 3 straight touchdowns. And I felt like they were almost feeding off each other in a negative way. I mean, it was accentuated by, some issues, the Jordan Travis fumble, obviously, and some other stuff as well. The offensive line, it felt like took a step back. The tackles both had pretty rough games. So, I definitely was. And I think that it speaks to, think about how many stretches we've seen like that over the last few years. It speaks to kind of how far they've come, that even a stretch of only about 15 minutes without much offensive production, 15 game minutes, that is 15, 20, that stood out,
Yeah. And I was surprised too, because so I asked you the question, it just Wake coming in wasn't known for having a prolific defense. Teams were able to find a lot of success against them. And especially that first drive that Florida State put together in the game, right? Come out and explosive, as perfect as you could imagine. Treshaun Ward hits a big run. Florida State gets a couple of big pass plays, and they just move down the field. Malik McClain, nice contested catch on the deep slant for a touchdown, right? I looked over to the guy next to me on the roof and said, they can't stop us. Like, I remember thinking that, and it was the very first drive. Wake's, background as a defense so far this year. And then all of a sudden, they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't find gaps other than really Ward, who had a nice day. Everybody else struggled, and Jordan looked a little off, and some of the throws were high. He didn't seem 100%, and he doesn't seem 100% healthy with that knee right now. You can just kind of tell he doesn't have the extra gear to make people miss and get up the field. But credit to him for continuing to fight to be there for his brothers. But guys, like the way FSU played offensively, their defense did enough, in my opinion, to win this football game. Like, yeah, they had moments that Wake Forest kind of had their way, but that's a really good Wake offense that's veteran and has an elite quarterback. I told you guys last week, I thought Florida State would win something like 42 to 38 or 45-42. So I expected points from both sides. It was a bit of a reality check, I think, for this offense, and those injuries are taking its toll a little bit up front. Not having a Lyles, a Scott, and a Bless Harris has really hurt you, because Washington he's a good player, but he's not. I don't know that he's Florida State as a 10-win New Year's Six bowl team type of starting tackle that you want there. And he struggled, and Wake's front three at times kind of pushed FSU around. Overall, just disappointed in that offense. I think that's large in a way, right? What I think had me upset the most was this was such an efficient offense too, Curt. Like they had played some decent. LSU's a good defense, and FSU looked like it could move them around a little bit.
Yeah. So Darius was in for Robert Scott. I think you might have Bless Jaston's replaced Bless at right tackle. We'll see what happens. I guess the good news on that front, I don't think they're as bad as they played. I think there are some circumstances that went into it. I think it's somewhat a credit to Wake. I think it's somewhat a credit to, Alex Atkins is definitely a guy who's endeared himself to the FSU fan base, but he kind of owned his role in it today, saying like, I've got to prepare guys. And his phrase that he went to a few times that I think is great. He talked about how he's like, the offensive line, we're not the most athletic on the team. So we kind of have to dictate. We have to be proactive. If we as an offensive line are reacting, we're already too late. And I think you saw that happen a few times. Robert Scott was dressed out. He tried to go. It felt like he was at least somewhat close. That he was dressed out, I think speaks to he was somewhat close. Felt like he was going to try. And so, if you get him back this week, it gives you at least one piece, and then you kind of figure out the other tackle spot. And I'm not sure there's a great option. I think Florida State's depth has improved, and I still think Florida State's a bit in a spot where it's having to put guys who are probably better fits at guard, at tackle, just because of the state of the line. Losing a guy like Bless, who was, I think, one of the best two tackle options, hurts that. And then being without, you're without, right, for that game, I think your two best tackle options. And so it causes some issues. But, Yeah, we'll see how they work around it. I mean, the problem is you're going against another, I think, a better on paper defense this week than the one you just went against.
NC State's going to be really good, guys, and we'll preview them here in just a minute. Berto, do you think? Do you think this offense can bounce back? Obviously, they've got some talent. Jordan Travis needs to probably get healthy for them to really maximize the potential of what that thing can be. But maybe this is just a speed bump for them.
Yeah, I think you kind of put it where, like, okay, they had an off game. The whole team wasn't really on. They were making mistakes, passes that weren't the Jordan Travis passes, of what we've seen early on this season. We did start off hot. That's the thing that kind of like got me where I'm like, okay, like we might this might be a blowout on our side, the way we were playing, but the being able to respond from Wake Forest, then us, not getting bounces our way, getting these, weird penalties. It's kind of like you don't now you watch the whole game and you see like how it happened, where it's like, man, like on these big plays, like if one or two or maybe even three of these go our way, like you said, we drive down, get on the floor, it's a 28-28 game, and it's like a completely different story. So I think the offense can bounce back from this. It's not as bad as what we think it might be. Compared to this good Wake Forest team that went into OT with Clemson last week. And I think we have our work cut out, but I think this was, I think out of all three of these upcoming games, the one to lose was probably like the best one to lose is this one, just because you learn and say, okay, we got that loss out of the way. We didn't play good. All right, let's keep going. And just build and learn from it. I know those guys are in the locker room after the game, like, man, like I could have played better. We could have actually beat this team if we played well and, didn't make these, mental mistakes and, not scoring in the red zone. There's a lot of things we can talk about, but I think this offense and the way this team has been this year, they're going to bounce and they're going to learn from this. They're going to come into NC State ready to play. They just lost. They don't want to lose again. But also NC State's going to come in just coming off of that loss to Clemson in North Carolina, and it's going to be definitely a tough place to play. 8:00 game too. Oh my gosh!
Yeah. It's an underrated.
They get all day to drink. Is I imagine how that plays out, and that normally goes hand in hand with a pretty rowdy crowd.
Yep, and they're like 2 feet away from you, 2 feet from your bench. And they're just talking all game.
It's one of the more underrated environments, I think, guys, like in college football. I think the average fan isn't going to think, oh, NC State, rabid fan base. Yeah. But if you're well-versed in the ACC, you know that Wolfpack Nation runs pretty deep and that they're pretty supportive of not just football, but they routinely support all of their athletics programs. And it's going to be a fun atmosphere there. But not all bad, right? From Florida State against Wake. I think there were some bright spots too. And Curt, you and I chatted a little bit about it at times over the weekend. The receiving core has improved, and you have to give Norvell a lot of credit. That's not 100%, right? Like Winston Wright's not. That Darian Williamson got hurt. I'm really excited for Micah Pittman to finally have that big game that we had all been waiting for, because he does all the little things right. And Johnny Wilson, I thought after a quiet week against Boston College, did some nice things too.
Yeah, no, it's the longer and longer this goes on where they keep being productive and then it keeps being a different guy every week. It continues to show this is not a fluke. This was the kind of thing where it was a great story 2 or 3 weeks in, but you kind of wanted to say, how does it continue? Because you need to see a little more. The sample size needs to get a little bigger before you fully buy into it. Now it's hard not to do that at this point. It's a really impressive group. It is a testament to not just what they did in the portal, but I know they're pretty picky in the portal. They've gotten a lot of guys in the portal, but it is not just in anybody. They're talking to guys. They're making sure they're a culture fit. They're making sure they're going to improve the mentality of the room with, wide receiver room more than anywhere else is going to be a room where you add the wrong personality type, a guy who wants to put up those numbers every week, it can throw everything off. And I think all four of those guys have been great culture guys. I think Johnny, Micah, Deuce Spann, even Winston, really hasn't played yet, have been great in that regard. And really, and it's a credit to the guys who are there already, who've embraced them and brought them in, and kind of it became for the greater good, not but these guys might be taking snaps from you.
Roberto, you don't have to name names. How many divas are at wide receiver that you've played with in your career?
A lot, but they're good. They're good. I played with a lot of good wide receivers, and this receiving core is looking a lot like those guys, and you just have so many options. I mean, to me, I've always wanted to see Florida State have a big wide receiver. I think on any team you need that big threat, that the Kelvin Benjamin, the Sammy Watkins, the 6'3" and above, for your go-to guy on deep routes or one-on-ones in the end zone. And then you need your smaller, short, shifty, Rashad Green type of guy. And then far in between, like both of those to have a good base, for your wide receivers. But they look good. I mean, Johnny Wells, every time he gets the ball, 6'7", 235, I'm like, oh my gosh. If I'm a DB, I'm like, how am I going to get this guy down?
Yeah, and I think you say it too. Like it's the way they complement each other, right? Like these receivers. Kenny Shaw was a guy back in the day that was just your best complement receiver. Everyone's worried about this guy and that guy, and then you're like, oh, I lost Kenny over the middle on a 15-yard deep curl where he just knows where to be. And so this group seems to have a lot of that too, Curt, where it's Wilson can stretch the field. Pittman can block, but also stretch the field at times and kind of settle in there on third downs. Cam McDonald stepped up, I think, a little bit this season, and Pokey Wilson and Malik McClain too have had big moments. It's just, I think it's a group that likes being around each other, but also on the field, they have good chemistry.
Agreed. I love watching Micah Pittman play. He runs so tough. I think I said it in our thread the other day, or one of our threads on the boards. I think I compared him to, it feels like and this is like, don't take this personally, Micah, like a small car, maybe a compact car, but like one that does really well in those crash tests. That's just like tough car. I mean, he is one tough SOB, and he runs hard. He is a lot of fun to watch. And I mean, Johnny's the guy. I mean, teams want to ban the fade. Yeah, anybody going against Florida State, I can understand why they may want to ban the fade, because that's almost automatic with him. He's a lot of fun too.
You ain't got nothing to worry about. Mike ain't listening to our podcast.
I tend to, hopefully no one.
He's busy. But yeah, no doubt, he is fun to watch, and it was really cool to see him get his first touchdown since 2019. Is that what he said? I think.
Yeah.
And so he's at Oregon. Yeah. And that's awesome. That kid's gone through a lot too in his career to get back from injury and kind of have that moment. So again, not all was bad. I didn't even think Jordan was that bad. I thought he fought for a guy that, is battling injury currently. And it's pretty obvious that the leg's not 100%. He stood in there and he took some shots and he delivered some good throws, even on a day where he would tell you, I'm not at my best right now. Physically and maybe accurately with my arm, but he did battle. So yeah, Treshaun Ward continues to be someone I think we all love watching play football. Every time he gets the ball, he runs like, his life depends on it. And that's a compliment to the highest sense, but tough loss. Last thing that I want to talk about against Wake, and then we can move on to NC State. Berto, feel free to chime in as much or as little as you want. Because I know you've talked to Ryan Fitzgerald before, but we have to address it at some point. Aiden's going to have to get a shot because, I mean, he looks cooked mentally right now. I mean, I saw videos too on Twitter where he was not following through on any of his kicks. And that's to a point where it's like, you're out of your fundamentals so bad right now that, like, if this was baseball, they would tell you need a day off from the play. Like, take the day off and don't worry about it.
Oh man. It's, as just putting my media hat on, it's a tough place to be in for him as a kid, playing at that position. And, it's I mean, when you're in it, you're in it, man. And it's like you try to get out as quick as possible. You don't want to be in that position, but can easily just creep up on you, and you're in this dark hole that you kind of like what you saw. I saw that too, the leg not being extended, and I know he's wanting to make the kick. He's not going out there like, oh, I'm going to go miss this kick, and he every kick he misses, it's more pressure being put on you. And then you start thinking what is wrong with me? Why can't I make it? I just missed a 29-yarder. And then you literally go to the side. You literally just you don't even know what to think. Am I thinking the right thing? He just, from an outside looking in, on TV, he just looks like he's lost confidence. I mean, when Wake Forest missed their field goal right before half, and we drove down, and we would have made that, it would have been 21-10 headed into half. Correct? We had him. That's when he missed it. I mean, that's another huge momentum change that we would have only been down 11. Getting the ball back in the second half. It's and the other crazy thing is not going for 2 points. Going for 2 points, that just shows all right, we don't have confidence. And then that doesn't help build your confidence. You're like, man, they don't even want to put me out there for extra points. And it's just kind of we're all behind him. We love him. We want him to be out there and making kicks because we know he can. It's just right now he's in a state where it's a lot of golfers, if they're listening to the pod, can relate when you're just out there and you can't hit a straight ball to save your life. That feeling. It's a helpless feeling. And to be honest, it's sometimes it can be part mechanically, but part mentally too. And they can honestly both, they can either help each other out or make each other worse, because then mentally you start not having confidence, and then you just don't worry about your mechanics. You're trying to force it instead of, trusting the process. Oh my gosh. We can go down a whole deep dive about this, but I think it starts in practice. It's I mean, at the end of the day, hey, I went through it. When you're not making kicks, they're going to bring in other guys. In the NFL, when you're not making kicks, that Monday morning, or Monday during meetings, you go into lunch and you look out in the field and you see, 3-4 other guys working out, and you're like, oh, well, I can't be missing because they're going to bring someone in that can do it. And, I've seen Aiden kick. Aiden's a good kicker. And it's just, then it's up to the coaching staff. What do we want to do? Because if we put Aiden in, he has to produce, and then, that can hurt more of Ryan's confidence. It's a lot, but it'll be interesting to see what goes on in this next game. And this game isn't going to be easy to kick in either. Shoot.
Curt, you have thoughts? I see your head moving around and nodding. I think you got some thoughts.
I will say the coaches today, 2 weeks ago after that Louisville game, when he went 0 for 2, they were pretty, it was Ryan as our kicker. And today it was, we're confident in what Ryan can be. We've seen it in games, and that's what I keep coming back to. And fans today, I saw some fans in my mentions on Twitter talking about, well, he's just not a gamer. It's you realize it was 10 of 13 last year. That he can be a gamer, and it's I'm sure the thing. You see it with all sports, really. A guy who's just lost it can get it back. It's just a matter of how does that happen and trying to push those right buttons. But today they talk about, we've seen what Ryan can be, but we're evaluating everything this week. There was no message for sure of Ryan is our kicker, because these next few games, a lot of games left on the schedule could be close, and it's hard to have faith in Ryan just from what you've seen in games this week. I'll say, from an optics standpoint, I realized how the extra point, or the not going for the extra point, looked. I think that was an analytical thing. I don't think that was a total, like, we're abandoning Ryan Fitzgerald. He can't make extra point. The broadcasters even talked about that on oh, they must not really try. And that's a bad look by the broadcasters and not know analytics. Like, if you're calling college football games, you should probably know the analytics. Normally, I think that's done down 14, not down 21. But they normally, I think it's, and Norvell talked about it a little post game, where I don't think that was a total abandonment of Ryan in that moment.
Roberto,
wait, one more.
Okay,
I don't have many problems with Mike Norvell and how he managed the game. One thing he cannot do is take that delay of game because he took too long deciding what he wanted to do and make a 50-yard field goal, a 55-yard field goal for a guy who's struggling like that. That is just you cannot have that in that moment.
Yeah, that's and especially how he's kicking, that you don't need that.
No,
don't do that to the kid, right?
He's already looking at that, and he's like, "Oh, this is a long one," and then he gets pushed back 5 yards, and he's like, "Oh my, coach, really?"
And whether or not and again, Roberto says you can't go for two, and Curt, we got the explanation later, but in that moment, I highly doubt that Mike Norvell went to Ryan Fitzgerald in the heat of the moment and said, "Oh, this is all analytical."
Oh no, he had to sit with that.
In his head, Ryan Fitzgerald's thinking, that's it. They don't even trust me to make extra points right now. So then to compound that, they run him back out there for 55. So now you're telling me that let's go to basketball here because I'm a basketball guy. I can't make layups right now. You don't trust me to go take the layup, but you want me to draw up a mid-court shot right now for me to make the half quarter. And that's I was very confused. It was okay, so you can't, you're not allowing him to kick, but 55 yards, hey man, go out there, give it a whirl. Let's see what happens. Again, Mike Norvell's a phenomenal coach, and he knows a hell of a lot more in his pinky finger about the game of football than I ever will learn. So I get it. But Berto, you have a kicking academy. I'm going to shout that out, plug that for you. Roberto Aguayo's Kicking Academy and rakickingacademy.com for all you youngsters out there. So in a lot of ways, you coach right now. This is what you do. If you were coaching Ryan Fitzgerald, what would you try and correct for him? And what are some messaging and things that you can even tell him to try and get him right again? If this was one of your students.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is what kids come to me for. And everyone's different. What I've come to know and see, and my years playing football is trying to find, like Curt said, their buttons. What's gonna click for them? Some guys are more, you don't really say that much. You say one or two things. Other guys like to talk it out more. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. I try to get as much as I can out of them because I know what they tell me. There's more. There's always more, and I want to get to that final, what really is going on in that brain, because that's the only way we're gonna figure it out, right? And because if you're not telling me completely how you feel, if you're telling me, oh, I think it's my mechanics, I think I should be and I'm like, is it really your mechanics though, or are you mentally just spooked out of your mind that you're trying to blame the mechanics when it really isn't the mechanic? And from what I see, especially when Ryan, his form and his mechanics are fine. We've worked on it, for the last 3 years, since I've known him. And, I help him. I don't say, hey, you need to switch and you need to do this. I tell him where I see, the good and where I see a little bit of a mistake, but his mechanics are fine. I think it's the lack of confidence, and he just gets too antsy and he gets too quick when he gets on the field. When he's in practice, he's smooth, he's slow, he's calm, he's composed. And in the games, you see he walks out with not as much confidence, not as much poise, and the doubt starts creeping in. And then you miss one, especially a 29-yarder. That's when I understand if it was the 55-yarder, okay, did he hit a good ball? And what I tell guys is when you go through your slumps, you're going to fall back on your process. The pre-shot routine you take out when you go out there, that's what you're going to fall back on. And to me, it's 3 words that I tell myself. that are going to give me an 85% success rate to make the kick. And it's inside panel, smooth finish. Those 3 things I'm telling myself, and that's all I'm thinking. And that'll get you through when you're in the trenches like he is right now. So what I tell him is 1 or 2 things that make you comfortable, make you feel good, make you have good thoughts. Stick to those 2 things. Don't think about anything else, how far, what the wind is, what the score is, what kind of grass I'm playing on. Think about those 2 things. And if you can do those, that's fine. That's all you had to do. And usually 85% of the time, you're going to make the kick. I know that was a lot, but
no. So physical, mental, emotional, right?
Yep, exactly. And now before it was just physical and mental, but now the emotional piece is out there with all the social media and really like, okay, emotionally, how am I feeling? Like, how am I preparing? Like sometimes when you go through this, like you don't even want to go to practice because you're just like, man, like I stink. Like anything, like nothing that I've tried to do has gone my way. Like, does my team even like really like care about me? Like, does you start thinking like the deepest, like darkest thoughts, like, am I 1 kick away from getting benched? Like, are they talking 8? You can think a lot of things. And that's why you got to have that guy and this is something that like, I kind of wish, and it might happen in college football, but like, if you know how the quarterbacks have the speaker, the mic in the ear if they had one for kickers, because a parent of an athlete told me, he was like, dude, every time he calls you and you talk to him, he'll go and have a great day. But he hasn't worked with you. He goes into a game. It's like he's somebody completely else. He's like, I wish you could be in his mic and tell him whatever you tell him, right? As soon as he's going to walk out on the field. And I'm like, honestly, like if it was right now for Ryan, like I would want to be like there just to talk through it, talk with it. It's like a caddy in golf. And you don't have caddies for football, but like a caddy will kind of get you right. Like Jordan Spieth loves to talk, and that's how he gets himself comfortable. He'll just talk to his caddy, and his caddy's telling him, like talking him through, and that's how people get through stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm here for him. We're all here for him. Like, I've been through it. I know how it feels like. It's not fun. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, my worst enemy, like what he's going through. But he's going to get out and this is just going to make him a better player and a better person overall, getting through, what he's going through right now.
You know what I would want to have in my headset if I was going on a kick? It'd be like Morgan Freeman's soothing voice telling me that you are a strong, independent man. You don't need anyone but yourself. Just things that hype you up so that you can go out there. I mean, could you imagine? Also,
you got this.
You are what your family loves you. Your existence is meaningful as you're kicking. It's just like the call map right in your ear. But
he just needs 1, and then that 1 turns into 2, and then turns into 3. He's missed his last 4, right? Yeah, man. He hasn't. I don't think
he's 4 for 9. I think
he's one of his last. He's one of his last 5. He made 1 against Boston College. He made the low pressure kick, but he missed 2 against Louisville, and he missed 2 against Wake.
And he missed the extra point against Boston College.
Yeah, so
he did miss an extra point. That negates the make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not statistically. That's not factual.
I mean, it's not a game you feel good about if you make your 1 field goal and miss an extra point.
Yeah, the extra point and the 29-yarder, those are like, you have to make those. And my hot take here would be that 55-yarder he shouldn't have got the 5-yard penalty, but it was originally a 50-yarder. I think in that sense, it's almost better for him going through a situation like this right now, because first of all, it's a far field goal. If you miss it, it's like, okay, the percentage rate to make a 50+ yard field goal is like 50-50. We'll give it to you. But if he makes it, that can switch everything, like right around. Like, I just crushed this 55-yarder, like, let's go. Like, I'm back in it, just like that. And he didn't hit a bad ball, but it's just, It's tough. So I think that could be another take that Norvell thought, like, you know what, we'll give him this opportunity. If he makes it, it'll be good. If he misses, okay, it was a 55-yarder. You never know, but that's just my take on it.
So physical, mental, emotional. I'm actually just reading your website right now. Good hosting is being prepared.
Give it the plug.
I will. Good hosting is being prepared for a show prior. Great hosting is researching while show is happening live. Continue the conversation. Also, I was today years old that I found out Ricky's name is Enrique. That was, I think I like Enrique more. I think he stick to that. That sounds like a future billionaire's name right there.
He left you on the island, huh? He Americanized it.
Yeah, Ricky. Yeah,
you didn't become Robert Aguayo.
No, my mom's the only one that calls me Robert.
Oh, your mom calls you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right, so yeah, that's tough, and for Fitzgerald, you really hope the kid makes it. And the thing is, too, guys, like last point, and we'll move forward, but it isn't exactly like the NFL in that you can just bring somebody in that's of the caliber of a D1 kicker tomorrow, right? So Fitzgerald is kind of here for the long run, at least for the season. And if you want to make any moves, that's an off-season decision. But like that is different from the NFL where you can run 3 or 4 guys out the next day that are pros. Yeah. This is the scholarship spot I have. Aiden's probably capable, but if he was better than Fitzgerald, he probably would be starting right now. So like, there has to be a patient approach at times, unless the coaching staff decides to abandon completely and game plan differently, right? Like if it's 3rd and 7, is that 2 down territory now for your team? And that's just the question that this coaching staff has to answer. And
I mean, you make a good point, because if he's the guy, I mean, unless some guy at Florida State can come in and say, hey, I don't know, I was a transfer and I was a kicker and I was a 4-star kicker, whatever, unless there's a guy there, maybe. But Aiden's, I mean, I don't think he would be better than Aiden, but still, if Aiden was, the guy, he would be starting, like you said. And I think you get in a situation where, hey, there's communication between Norvell and Fitzgerald. It's like, hey man, like, we know you're struggling. We get it. Like completely, like, fine. Everyone goes through it, quarterback, whatever. We're here for you. Like, tell me comfortably, like, if you don't want to go out there for a far field goal, like, so we can game plan better and be on the same page. Because the worst feeling is being on the sideline and you're like, I don't know if I want to go. And you look and the coach looks at you. He's like, you good? And then you're just like, yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Like, to help him get out of this, slump that he's in right now, because we're going to need you eventually. Like, what do we need to do? And just be, on the same page. Because if the coach thinks you're confident, but really you aren't confident, then you're not on the same page there. And it's just going to be worse for you guys. You know what I mean?
And you can't exactly say no in that situation.
Exactly.
No, I don't want to kick here. You think you should go for it?
Yeah.
Well, Curt, I mean, does FSU have to, from your media, put your media hat on here that you always have?
Media hat's always on.
That's what you get paid for. Does FSU do things differently from a schematical standpoint going forward? I guess it at least has to be brought up for conversation at this point.
Mike Norvell's are already on the forefront of analytics of the decisions to go for it. I think you've seen that really throughout his tenure, and that's taken some getting used to. I think he might have more people on board with him if he's willing to go for it a little more often, or just be aggressive with the 4th down calls at this current moment. I mean, obviously, like Roberto said, ideally you want to flip that back at some point, and I think who knows if there is a moment where Ryan Fitzgerald kind of finds his mojo again. But I think there's absolutely a world where, I think we've seen a little of it. I think we saw it somewhat against Boston College, where there's some 50-ish yard field goals where you might normally trot your kicker out on like a 4th and 3, and they went for it. And that some of that's, I think, just Mike Norvell's analytical mind. And I think some of that's not wanting to throw your kicker out there for tough field goals when he's struggling. The game situation against Wake Forest late kind of necessitated that 50-yard field goal attempt. But Yeah, I think it's possible.
Look, we're all rooting for the kid.
Hey,
right?
I can't wait for the tweet when he crushes a big kick. I'm back like Cam Newton.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
100%.
Ryan Fitzgerald is back.
I do predict this, and if it'll be crazy if we have to circle back to this episode. I predict Ryan Fitzgerald hits a game-winning field goal for Florida State at some point this season. There will be one game where the best stories are like that, right? Like kid who couldn't
100%.
figure it out, all of a sudden it feels like the football gods bring that to you. And that story will write itself. ESPN will have 80 cameras to cut from. You'll have signs in the stands and banners hanging later because Roberto's fist pumping, because that is literally the dream. That is every kicker's dream, is to have that moment. In the way that everyone wants the buzzer beater 3-point shot, kickers want the buzzer beating game winner. So we're rooting for Ryan, man. I know we're supposed to be neutral as media members, but I'd like to see this kid figure it out for not just FSU's sake, but for his sake, and to keep this thing going. But all right, guys, let's talk about NC State briefly here. We don't have all the information in the world on them yet. Curt, myself, Pat Burnham, Bob, and Jerry will continue to look into the Wolfpack as they play Florida State this weekend at 8:00. But first glance, Curt, we'll start with you. Very good defense from Dave Doran. He's built a tough-minded program, kind of in the same mold that he did at Northern Illinois before he took over the job in Raleigh. And that's a good football team that I think is also flying under the radar somewhat the way Wake was.
I agree. I mean, I think they you don't want to say they got put in their place. I think they were a trendy pick to win the Atlantic coming into the year. And I think that Clemson game it was not, I would say, not as close as the 30-20 final score indicated. I know they got a touchdown late. It was 30-13 before a touchdown with about a minute left. But yeah, I think they are a good team. And I mean, it's a place where the last few times Florida State's gone up there, they haven't played especially well. The offense hasn't blown me away. I think they're somewhat reminiscent a little bit of some Florida State receiving cores over the last few years. They've got one guy. Thayer Thomas has been real good for them. He's been good for a few years. He's over 300 yards. And next to that, they only have two receivers who had even 100 receiving yards this year. The defense, like you said, is good. The offense, I have some questions about. It feels almost like an inverse of Wake Forest last week, but we saw how that went. So who knows? I mean, it's a little hard to get a read on things just because college football can be unpredictable. It's what we like about it.
Roberto, you said it a little bit earlier, but that's a hard place to play. And from your playing days there, like that can be an intimidating environment. And historically speaking, FSU has struggled at Carter Finley.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people when they tell me, it's the toughest place to play. And I say, obviously, that the harder places, the Clemson and Florida, those are the tough. But I'm like, the low key, like the sneaky hard place is Carter Finley. Man, that place gets loud there. It's just something about the environment, and it's going to be a night game. It brings me back because when I was there, I don't think we played. The only time we played them at night was that 2012 year, and the rest were during the day. But Carter Finley at night, and they're number 14 in the country. Like, we're going to have our work cut out for sure.
Kurt, you're going to be there
on the upright after that 2012 game.
The what?
The dude swinging from the upright. The dude swinging from the upright. Wasn't that after the 2012 game?
Yeah, that was a big boy.
Really?
As a big man with his shirt off.
I'll show you the clip.
I don't remember.
Roberto was not looking at
I just remember.
Roberto was walking off.
No, in the moment, of course, that's not where. I know you didn't play in that game, Roberto, but I know that's not where your head is in the moment. But it's a wild gif that still gets used. A dude like swinging a shirt while he's like hanging from an upright.
It's crazy because when I got drafted, when I got to the Bucks, Mike Glennon was the backup quarterback, and I was like, Mike, bro, I still remember that 2020 or 2012 loss against you guys in Carter Finley. He was like, yeah, man, I know that was crazy. I came back to win it, but Mike Glennon was that quarterback.
Glennon's trying to get into media too right now, I think.
Yeah.
Glennon on Twitter.
Yeah,
he's been showing Jordan Trapp some love.
Mike Glennon.
Mike Glennon. I remember how many crossing routes did they run on that last drive. It was like drags and crosses, and we
don't want to make the fan base relive that one too much. I know that's still a sour memory for a lot of people. So but it speaks to, it's a tough place to play. It's a place that Florida State hasn't played especially well the last 2 trips up there.
The trip right before that 2012 one, before Roberto and I got to Florida State and Roberto started kicking, it was 2010, and Ponder fumbled inside the 5 against Russell Wilson on a game-winning drive for FSU. That fans remember that. So it's just that place is hard to play. And I think Roberto, that 2014 year that you mentioned, we went up there, and I think NC State got out to like a 24-7 lead or something like that.
Yeah, that was another one of our comebacks. Yeah.
You guys had to come back from a pretty big halftime deficit.
Yeah, that was another one of our 21-point games that we had to come back. And it's every time we went there and every time we played NC State, we knew like they're going to give us a fight. Like if we don't come ready to play, like they can beat us. And we knew that like going in, and especially at their place, it's even harder. I wonder what the spread is for that game.
So
what do you got?
It opened at 5.
Yeah.
NC State -5, and I think got bet down to like NC State -3 or 3.5.
Really?
Yeah. That's interesting. Maybe that's a case. It's possible that's a case of you know, places open at slightly different lines. But I mean, it speaks to 3.5 in that range. That's normally about what they say at home field. So that says if the line holds there, that means that they kind of consider this about a toss-up on a neutral site, which is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Like the 3.5 spread is so it's basically looked as a toss-up because they give the 3.5 spread to the home team if it's a toss-up. So basically they're saying it's a 50-50 chance for either one of them to win, which is, I mean, good. I guess good for us.
It speaks to some questions about that team, which there are.
Yeah, I think there's some respect finally for Florida State too, though, right? Like I think there's definitely a little bit of, and the metrics, I think the numbers love Florida State right now. Like advanced analytics, or the offensive efficiency for FSU is pretty high. Defensively, they've been pretty good, and so I know Vegas uses those numbers, so that might be coming into play. Noles hot start. We'll see. This was what we all said, right? These 3 games: Wake, NC State, Clemson. We would find out if Florida State was just good or if they were very good. And I think we all think this is a good football team. Like it's very clear, barring more injuries, like this team is going to win 7 games at least, and maybe 8. And, 9 is not like the above 8 is not out of the complete realm of possibility if they get some key guys back. So for us to be sitting here on October 3rd and saying that, I think is credit to Mike Norvell, the staff, the players, that have been all in on this process. And I think we for the first time in a while have enjoyed Florida State football at this level, and being able to keep track and cover and follow. So 8:00 in Raleigh, ACC Network. For those of you who have not heard, Curt Weiler will be there on site, as will Pat Burnham. Guys, I got nothing else really. If you want to make predictions, we can. Do you guys want to do that or wait until later in the week, Curt? What do you think?
I'm not sure.
I'll give you maybe a couple keys. Give me a couple keys to the game.
Get off the field on 3rd down. Didn't see a whole bunch of that against Wake Forest, and think that against an offense that we have questions about. I think get them behind the chains. I think plays into that too. I think part of why Wake had so much success on 3rd down was I think their average distance was 6 yards to go, and that was weighted with some pretty long ones. So they had plenty of short or medium that were easier to convert. Show you're ready to play early. Don't let that crowd get out of control. Because we talked about that crowd. If you score on your first drive, maybe have an early lead. I think you've seen kind of what that can do for a crowd. It can subdue things a little bit. I think we saw that a little bit at Doak Campbell Stadium this past weekend. And I don't know. I mean, I think a Jordan Travis bounced back. Not that he was bad, I don't think, this past week, but I think he was. It speaks to how high a level he's been playing at, that he had a good game, not a great game, and it was kind of like an outlier for his season. I mean, he's been playing at a really high level, and so I mean, I think if he does that, I think if he's able to use the legs, whether that was not feeling 100% there, or whether that was kind of just not feeling confident maybe there, whatever the limitation he's had with his legs, I think that would do wonders for the offense. And this feels like a game, if he is able to be mobile, where that could really open things up against that really good NC State front seven.
We'll see how it goes, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. Would like to see them maybe create some turnovers as well, fellas. I think that against Louisville on the road ended up being a big deal, was the Noles able to create some turnovers defensively and capitalize on that. So tough place to play, as Roberto has had that experience there. Curt, you'll have fun covering this weekend, and Florida State looking for a big win. This would be a big statement for the program and where they're at right now, if they can go into Raleigh and kind of do something that hasn't been done there a ton in general. So
is this a sod game? Does anyone know that?
Yeah. The Florida State's an underdog.
It's any road underdog. So yes, it would be.
I wonder who the sod captain will be for that. How was sod captain picked, Berto, back in your day? Was that a coaching staff decision or players?
Yeah, coaching staff decision. I'm pretty sure coaching staff decision. Yeah, there would be two guys designated to get the turf at the end of the game when we would win. And I remember, that Clemson game, the 2013 year, we got that sod.
Big time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good stuff from you here today. Curt, great job as always. And those of you just listening on Apple, we appreciate you. Please give us 5 stars. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and also anywhere else that your favorite podcast is on. So appreciate you guys as always. Noles and Wolfpack Saturday. We'll be back next Monday night recording and Tuesday release of First and Nole. And until we talk to you again, for Roberto Aguayo and Curt Weiler, I'm Ariya Massoudi.